So the question we're looking to answer today is, should you go to theaters and watch His Only Son? I actually got invited out to Utah to watch the premiere of His Only Son, and now that it's out in theaters, I want to talk to you guys about whether or not you should go see it. And here's the gist of it. I do think that you would really enjoy this movie. So if you want to go this weekend, there's a link down in the description down below to buy your tickets. And honestly, this might be the perfect Easter movie for you and your family to watch this year. Along with maybe sitting down and watching The Chosen, of course. There's a lot of stuff on Angel Studios that you could check out during this time of year. Remember that the first weekend release of a movie is insanely important, so make sure that you get your tickets and go this weekend if you possibly can. Now, to be clear, this video is sponsored by Angel Studios. You guys know them, you love them. They've put out a bunch of amazing shows and have obviously worked with The Chosen since the beginning, but now they're working on a ton of other things. And I'm telling you, over the next few years, there's some projects that are coming out of Angel Studios that are just mind-blowing. And I'm so excited for the future of these projects and what's upcoming, trust me. And while this video is sponsored by Angel Studios, they didn't get to see it ahead of time or get to clip out parts they didn't like. In fact, they told me that I could be extremely honest and tell my exact opinion about the movie overall. And there are some parts of this movie that I really loved, and some parts that I thought could have been better. So let's dig into it and let's talk about this movie overall. No spoilers. We're just gonna be talking about how I enjoyed the movie. So this movie is all about Abraham, Isaac, and Sarah. These are really the three main characters of the film overall. And it starts with Abraham getting the call from God to sacrifice his son, Isaac. And of course, this is a monumental moment in the life of Abraham and Sarah and all that's going on there. But this really tracks over the 3-day journey to Mount Moriah, where the sacrifice is supposed to happen until the substitute is provided. So this is a really interesting time in Abraham's life, because the whole time has this really heavy weight, right? Of I'm supposed to sacrifice his son that you promised me, and all this stuff that's happening. Now, this is a really interesting story to choose, and one of the reasons why the director David Helling decided to choose this story is because a lot of his non-Christian friends would use this as a counterpoint to say, well, I would never want to follow a God who would ask me to sacrifice my own kid. And there's a lot more to the story than that. And we as Christians, at least those that have done study of this story, know that. There's a lot that goes into this with cultural significance, and obviously God providing the substitute and the parallels to Jesus and all of that. So there's a lot that happens within the story that a lot of people don't know. But this film really gets to the emotional weight that Abraham would have to carry during those 3 days, thinking about how he's going to sacrifice his son. It's a pretty emotional movie at some points, and it's really heavy for Abraham the whole time. All right, so let's get into the good for this movie. This is not a cringe Christian movie. It's not a Hallmark sort of like, oh, they were not a Christian, then now they're a Christian now, and it's just this weird convoluted story. It's more of a biblical based story that's really retelling the Bible story that we know of Abraham and Sarah and Isaac, but obviously kind of like The Chosen, adding in some in-between moments or adding in certain elements to help describe things that they weren't allotted time for, different things like that. And so it's overall a really good movie as you look at it. Some things that I loved were the biblical story, obviously having the foundation of Abraham and Isaac and all the biblical foundation that you have there is really good. They don't deviate too much from the biblical story, and so you have the characters that we know. There are a few characters that are obviously added in or unnamed from the Bible that add some story elements and different things like that, which is really interesting. I thought they did a great job with that overall. I also love the parallels that they had between different parts of the Bible and how that interacts with the Abraham and Isaac story. It's really powerful when that's done correctly, and we see how God oriented things in a specific way at a specific time. It's really interesting to see how that works out. Now, my favorite actor from the film was actually Sarah. The woman who plays Sarah is amazing. She did such a great job, and I feel like for me was the highlight of the film. She did so well in all the different situations that she was put in, or the emotional scenes she was put in. Really well done. All of the actors throughout had different emotions and weights that they were carrying, especially Abraham and Sarah throughout this film. They're really the bulk of what kind of happens here. But as we get through all of that and they get to Mount Moriah, the climax of this movie is actually so good. I think they really nailed how they needed to end this movie and how everything kind of just came together at the end. And last but not least on my good list is just the amazing quality of the film. It's shot on really nice cameras, they got good lighting, and while this project was only filmed over 14 days or so, it was actually done very well. I actually got to speak with David Helling, the director and creator of this film, over the last few days quite a bit. And it was really cool to be able to sit down with him and just talk to him about the film, see what he was going through as he was experiencing making this film overall. And truthfully, they only had about $250,000 to make this movie, when in actuality, if you're doing a theatrical release like this and doing a really big movie, you're gonna have anywhere from $10 to $50 million for this movie, right? So he obviously did an amazing job with what he was given, and he even learned how to do VFX and really poured his soul into the project over 5 years of really perfecting this film. So with the constraints that he was given, I really thought that it came out well. So these are really the reasons that I think you should go and watch the movie. I think it is good overall. However, there are some things that I don't think meet quite up to that bar that we now have in Christian media and in media in general. There are some things that I just wish would be better, and I think are going to stop a more generalized audience from really enjoying this movie for what it is. And remember, as I go over this list, I am being hypercritical because this is my job, right? I am a reviewer, I think about Christian media, and I really want the best to come out from Christian media. So I am being overly critical. So maybe not take everything to heart here. The first thing on my list is that this movie has a very, very slow start. And while this didn't actually bother me too much, I do think that if you're not prepared to go into the theater and really watch this film, then it's not going to hit properly. You really need to be paying attention and to be focused on the film and not be distracted. I also thought that there was a few moments of really slow dialogue. So it just felt sort of unnatural. And this to me is sort of a cardinal sin when it comes to writing in the script or acting in general. The dialogue needs to feel natural. If it doesn't, I can't connect with the movie, and it just feels like a movie rather than me actually being immersed into the world that the movie is trying to create. If the dialogue isn't natural or feels human, then there's an issue there for me. But on the contrast to this as well, there were several moments when the dialogue was amazing and it really felt good. So just a bit of a hit and miss there for me. And the last thing on my list is actually budgetary barriers, which is probably the biggest thing. This caused the director David to really split his focus and split his time into many different areas. So David was not just the director or the writer or the creator, but he was also the VFX artist, the costume designer, and everything else in this film. Now, they did have a real crew and they did have a cinematographer and they did have these other things, but it was really ragtag and people were kind of stepping in and out everywhere to help where they needed. And David really got stuck in that. He was doing everything for this movie, and it really was all on his shoulders. Now, while he did an amazing job, I think if the budget was bigger, they could have hired a whole VFX team or a costume design team or really had people that were just amazing in these other areas so that David could focus on what he needs to focus on as a director and creator. So because the movie was so low budget, there were certain things that kind of pulled me out of the reality of the situation. For example, some of the wigs in the show are just distracting. It feels like a wig. It doesn't feel like natural hair. Certain things like that kind of pulled me out of the world and pulled me out of the movie to make me start thinking about that instead of the scene that we were in. Like I said, I think with the budget they had, they did an amazing job, and the movie is good. I think that David is an extremely talented director, writer, and creator, and I think he just needs a better team around him to do more and more and more. I am so excited about the future of what David wants to do and the future films that he wants to make. And I'm ready to be a part of that and to help him in any way that I can. But I just think in this specific instance, there were certain things that were let down by the budget and the time constraints and everything else that they had with filming this movie and getting through it. So I don't know. I think overall the movie is really good, and I think that you should go see it. I think that you would enjoy it a lot. As always, I want to be as fair as I possibly can, not only to the director and the cast and the crew, but also to you guys, so that you can know exactly what to expect when you're going to see a movie like this. If you haven't already, make sure to click that link in the description down below and get your tickets for His Only Son this weekend so that we can really make sure that we can keep creating great Christian content. It's worth it. Go to the movies, watch it, and let me know what you think afterwards. All right, we'll see you on the next one. Peace.